and this is kind of on the carnivore's perspective a little bit. Everything in nature consumes and impacts something else. We think, oh, well, it's wrong to eat animals, but other animals eat animals. Well, other animals were designed to do that. We're not. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But we think about different geographic locations in different time periods. There are plants that consume insects. There is a species of fungus that it advances itself by implanting its spores into insects and taking over their bodies, basically. So they turn into zombies and they go and pretty much they die themselves, and the fungus spreads out of their body. Like, that's pretty brutal. Yeah. So when you think about it, did the insect give consent for that or not?
Like The Last of Us, that fungus.
Right, exactly. So, when you look at it that way, every form of life has some sort of purpose to fulfill, to advance something else, or there's something else that's trying to take from that. So if we're going to say that we are part of nature, the question becomes, is it entirely wrong to take something near the bottom of the food chain, like a mouse, and use it for experimentation? Because on the flip side, you have, other mice, you have rats, you have frogs. There are frogs large enough to eat rats. Did you know that? Snakes, cats, owls, hawks. There are so many predators. The average expected lifespan for a mouse in the wild is only a handful of months at best. And to me, that, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but it does introduce the question of whether or not we are causing more harm than we would be without it. And once we do take them out of this environment and we raise them in these labs to be experimented on, we can get a lot of information about biology, about how certain chemicals react in bodies. But as you said, the animal body is so radically different from ours. A mouse is so far removed from a human. The only course of action to go from there is to step it up, right? So we have to step it up to, something larger, more complex. The question is, how far do we go before it's up to a cat? And I don't think anyone's comfortable with, taking a cat brain out and putting a human brain in, or, man's best friend, a dog. Or you're going up from there, to something more like a human, like a pig, ironically, with a more complex brain, or a chimpanzee, or a gorilla. Yeah. It starts to really get a bit more uncomfortable as it gets closer and closer to human looking. Mm-hmm. And so I think when it comes to this question, it's like, yes, it's a lower life form, and you can make that argument, but as you mentioned, we have to get to human at some point. If we're not willing to experiment on humans, why are we willing to experiment on our next closest relatives, other primates? Because they have shown signs of emotion, attachment, fear, pain, even revenge. Chimpanzees are scary creatures. Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Yeah, they are. But it also does beg the questions, like, where do we draw the line? Like you're saying, as they get closer to looking like humans, to acting like humans, or expressing emotions like a dog, which is very similar to humans, you start to get more uncomfortable with experimenting on them. And it's like, should we just draw a line between like all animals, or is it just some animals? And I feel like it's a little hypocritical, in my opinion, just to like say, okay, well, I relate to those animals, so the rest of them I don't care. But that's like saying I relate to this community of humans, but that community of humans I don't relate to as much, and I don't find that much tribal commonality in them, and I'm just gonna like, whatever, fuck them. It's like it's like a very discriminatory way of, I think, perceiving life. And I mean, I feel like you just gotta respect all life, even if you don't like them, even if you don't like chimpanzees. There's a lot of animals I don't like, but I can still respect them enough to like not want to experiment on them or kill them. Mm-hmm. And I think it also just comes down to like what you believe. Like, do you believe animals are, here with you? Do you believe animals are here to kill you? Do you believe we're all one? Like a lot of the new spiritualities, like promoting that idea of oneness, where everyone is expression of the universe, just pieces of the same entity. So it's like, when you start seeing life like that, then it's like, all right, we can respect them, but we might not like them, we might not know them, we might not care about them. But it's like, once you start viewing things like that, viewing life like that, viewing other animals and insects like that, you kind of understand that you got to be a little gentle with these lower life forms, as we call it, or just maybe life forms that maybe they're not even lower. Maybe they're just experiencing the world differently, mm-hmm. right? Maybe they just have like an intelligence that we can't even detect, mm-hmm. but it's far more intelligent than we are.
Right.
But yeah, it is interesting how we've come to a entire culture around the world where we just experiment on animals like it's nothing. And I think a lot of it is biases, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
That's a huge point. And we're honestly not that far removed from a point in time when certain groups of people were seen as less than human. Therefore, it was right to experiment on them. I mean, there are whole histories where you can actually look and see how African Americans were used for research. You know, their bodies were used for research. And a lot of times it was justified, number one, with them saying, you know, they're less than human. And then number two, oh, well, they have higher pain tolerance. There's actually still in certain medical journals research that suggests that African American women have a higher pain tolerance and therefore need less medication and less treatment. As we sit here today in 2023, like, we know this is not necessarily true, but that stuff like that was never removed. And so that point about bias is huge, because what do you deem less than yourself? And you made a great point about different levels of consciousness, because so when I read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, there's a great book. Yeah. Great book. One of my favorite things about it was this concept of the language of the world. You know, a language that didn't use words, that everything in nature knew, whether it was an animate object or an animal or something.
Yes.
And to me, that just suggests, whether you take it as just purely fiction or potentially realistic to life, there are different means of communication. I mean, think about birds that flock in these massive flocks, you know, hundreds of thousands of birds, or fish in hundreds of thousands of fish in these massive schools. They can organize and move as one. How? They don't have words. They have, all their actions are happening so quickly, there's no way they can take it and spread. But they move as one organism. There's a level of communication. Even in plants, you know, new research is suggesting that plants have a certain amount of awareness of their surroundings, even people's intentions as you approach them. I'm sure you might have seen experiments where you say positive or negative things to plants and they grow and whatnot.
Yeah, I've seen that with water too. Mm-hmm. You can just change like the nature of the water, and like if it's going to like, you know, get nasty and dirty, or if it's going to just, you know, remain nice, clean, and calm just by saying certain words like "I love you" or "I hate you."
Right.
It's crazy.
I think whether you necessarily believe in the energetics of it or not, it's really interesting, because what I saw in one of these tests was they took a whole room of plants and hooked them up to like polygraph machines and a couple other things, and they watched how plants reacted to certain words being said or certain sounds being played, and even certain people walking in and out of the room. And full disclosure, I have to follow up with this for more facts, but from what they were saying in this, you know, the plants had awareness of when you had positive or negative intentions towards it. They could react if you had kitchen shears, or even if the neighborhood lawnmower guy would come through.
Yeah,
they could react to that. That suggests that if it is taken as true, and more studies have to be done, that plants even have some level of consciousness that we just didn't understand before. So who's to say what is a lower being? It may be less complex genetically speaking, but in terms of existence, it might not be a lower life form. So, you know, it goes back to the question we opened this with. If we, just because we can do something, does it mean that we should? And I like, the last thing I'll say is, I like that you pointed out, you know, the discrepancy between how you might relate to one group of people or one type of animal versus others. It points back to regional and cultural differences.
Yeah.
Over here, you would never think about eating a cat or a dog. Other parts of the world, you would never think about eating a cow. Like, that's just, what are you talking about?
Yep.
So where do we draw the line? What's sacred and what's not?